Pleasure of introducing two very special guests, Councillor Josh Cole, who represents Toronto's Eglinton Lawrence Ward 15, sorry. He will be reading a proclamation from the mayor, and also Councillor Mihevc, who represents Ward 21, St. Paul's. So I'd like to, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Josh Cole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I had to make a joke to one of my Trinity friends that we're starting our 9:30 event right on time at 10 o'clock. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I certainly, I know Councillor Mihevc too, and we're kind of blessed in our parts of the city in our ward to have really vibrant, wonderful Caribbean communities, and so we're both excited to be here and to recognize Caribbean Week. And on behalf of Mayor and Rob Ford and the City Council, I will read this to you. Whereas Caribbean Week in Toronto celebrates the vibrancy of Caribbean culture and strives to promote tourism, engage the Caribbean diaspora, and highlight everything the Caribbean has to offer, Caribbean Week is an initiative of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Caribbean's tourism development agency comprised of more than 30 governments and a variety of private sector entities. CTO provides support to member countries in areas of marketing, human resources, research and information technology, and encourages the development of sustainable tourism. Caribbean Week in Toronto will include the participation of tourism officials, artists, entertainers, and celebrity chefs, that's good, as well as the youth of the Caribbean diaspora. In Toronto, we encourage and welcome celebrations of our many cultural groups that work hard to preserve their heritage. These celebrations promote understanding and enrich our social and cultural development and the quality of life for many. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Rob Ford, on behalf of the Toronto City Council, do hereby proclaim December 5th to 10th, 2011 as Caribbean Week in the City of Toronto, and I encourage, this is my add-on, everyone in Toronto for a week to walk good. So thank you very much.
So, good morning, everyone. Silence. Usually that silence comes at the end of my speeches, not the beginning, because most people are sound asleep. My name's Hugh Riley. I'm the Secretary General of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. It's a pleasure and an honor on behalf of the governments and people of the Caribbean to welcome you here. Usually there is not the presence, the official presence of councillors and representatives of the city here when we do these things, certainly not so early in the morning. So let me begin by thanking the mayor and thanking the councillors, Mihevc and Cole, for being here. Thank you so much for bringing your official stamp to this very special event. I must tell you that there has been a suggestion or two over the years that we do this particular event, Caribbean Week in Toronto, in February, and that we have a version of it in the Caribbean in February. If you want to take that message back, or let me take that message back to our governments, that the officials are insisting that we do one of these in the middle of winter in the Caribbean, there you go. That could work. But in all seriousness, thank you so much for giving your blessing officially to this particular event. Canada is an incredibly important market to the Caribbean. I suppose, as you all know, that there are historic and cultural and familial connections that we have with Canada that go back, in fact, several hundred years. And we are extremely proud to see that all of those relationships have blossomed and flourished over the years and have resulted in this market in Canada being a very significant producer of business to the Caribbean. I was looking at a statistic recently, which perhaps isn't often shared. I don't know whether it's ever been shared. I was looking at the source markets for the Caribbean. And many of you know that North America is, by combination, the #1 source of business to the Caribbean. But I was looking at Europeans and Latin Americans and so on, and discovered that of all of the markets where we do business in the tourism industry in the Caribbean, Canadians seem to like us more than anyone else. What that means is that there are more Canadians per capita that visit the Caribbean than from any other place on the planet, which is pretty impressive to me. I think out of a population of certainly less than 35 million people, we get 2.8 million visitors from Canada a year, which to me is incredible. That percentage doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So on behalf of the entire Caribbean, thank you for the business. Thank you for treating us with such importance when you make your travel decisions. One of the statistics that I know that we're particularly proud of also, and this though speaks to a more individual country-specific statistic, is the repeat visitor factor from Canada. Canadians have tremendous loyalty, and so the numbers of Canadians that keep coming back to the Caribbean is a significant factor as well. And one statistic that I know that we have not yet collected, but it's very much on our minds. It's not that easy to collect this, but I will tell you that the aspect that we aim for most of all is this. Now, we know that if we do our job right, you will come again. And I'll talk more about some of the things that we're doing to make sure that we do that job right and that we seduce you into coming back. But the more difficult task is to get people to recommend our destinations to others. If you are willing to place your relationship and your reputation with your neighbors on the line to say, take your hard-earned dollars and come with me, or take your hard-earned dollars and, on my say-so, go to the place that I have been visiting, that's the kind of recommendation that every destination aims for your visitors, your people, your citizens, to recommend our destinations to others. And that's what we really are aiming for. And when we get to the point where we can say, this is really happening in observable numbers, then we will be extremely proud of our accomplishment as good hosts. So I'm going to just very quickly refer to a few of the notes that I have in front of me. I was warned that I'm not here to make a speech, but rather to hear from the media so that I tell you what you want to hear rather than what I feel that I need to say to you. Travel to the Caribbean from Canada is up 7 to 8% so far this year when compared to the corresponding period last year. And overall, the Caribbean is performing well, and arrivals are expected to have grown between 4 and 5% by the end of 2011. That figure also, I'm pleased to say, tracks very well with what the UNWT, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, says is happening in the world. And as you know, we're all concerned, everybody, no matter what business you're in, is constantly concerned about market share, and we're always watching to see how we do relative to the rest of the world. And so I'm happy to say that when we look at the world figures and we look at our own arrivals figures, we're seeing that we're trending with the rest of the world. It's all good news. 12 Caribbean countries saw an increase in Canadian tourists in 2011, and particularly noteworthy were some of our countries that showed a 50% increase. One country showed a 37.4% increase, another a 33% increase, and yet another 23.4% increase. So really substantial increases in some cases. Ontario has historically been the province with the most Caribbean visitors, and that trend is continuing. You probably realize that even though Ontario will perhaps forever be the #1 source of visitors, those of you who pay a great deal of attention and who do some coverage across the country realize that more and more visitors to the Caribbean are also now coming from the prairie provinces and beyond. And in fact, there's been a concerted effort to get visitors from out west, and we can talk some more about that as we go along. But those of you, I know there's at least one person in the audience from Vancouver. You'll know that our numbers are increasing from out west as well. Some of the trends that we're focusing on to continue to earn your business: promoting the shift towards sustainable experiential tourism. It's something that the Caribbean member countries of CTO offer in some excess. We make sure that we pay attention to the experience. From 2007 to 2010, there's been a very steady increase in visitors, and one of the things that we track very carefully at the CTO is how visitors enjoy the experience. We pay a great deal of attention to exit surveys. We pay a huge amount of attention to understanding how we're doing and how we can do better. This seems to be a good point at which to mention that earlier this year we introduced TVS, Total Visitor Satisfaction. We'll talk some more about that as we unfold it, as we get deeper into it, and as we announce it to the public properly. But Total Visitor Satisfaction is very simply a visitor satisfaction rating, which the Caribbean is introducing. Hasn't been done anywhere else. There's no other region in the world that has this total visitor satisfaction rating. And very simply, it is a measure of how we are doing in delivering the quality experience that visitors come to the Caribbean to expect. So it starts off by, we've done the research going in to find out what the 10 or 12 criteria are that are specifically important to visitors to the Caribbean, and then our destinations individually will be rated against those criteria. And guess what? The rating gets done by the visitors, not by us. So there's a lot of science involved, and there's a lot of mechanical stuff involved in this, because there's no such thing as a visitor satisfaction index. So there's an algorithm that's being created to determine, with all the variables involved, how to come up with this visitor satisfaction index. So the bottom line is this: the Caribbean is saying to Canadians and to the whole world that we are paying attention to the experience. We're not taking it for granted that people will keep coming to the Caribbean no matter what. Let's face it, everybody is watching their dollars. Everybody is concerned about disposable income. Everyone is concerned about value for money. Everyone is concerned about getting the maximum. And the maximum is more than just the sun, sea, and sand. It's more than just the physical. We expect that we have to deliver service that is just beyond your expectations. It comes down to a very, very simple concept. We say that if we are the most tourism-dependent region in the world, and we are, you've seen the statistics, you know that 1 in 9 jobs in the Caribbean is derived from the tourism industry. So when you measure that against the rest of the world, we are the most tourism-dependent region in the world. And if that's what we are, we must care more. And we're demonstrating that we care about the experience that we deliver, and we are going to make sure that we fix the things that the visitors say need to be fixed as far as that experience is concerned. So total visitor satisfaction is an index that we treat very seriously. More on that as we go along. As I say, the back end is now being created properly so that it becomes a serious and meaningful tool for us, for the visitors, for the media, for the tourism industry to determine how the Caribbean is doing against that particular index. You should know that we're focusing a great deal of attention on the Caribbean diaspora as well. This is one of our greatest resources here in Canada. The Caribbean diaspora is, not too surprisingly, perhaps the most vocal and dedicated sales force that we have anywhere. Caribbean people are fiercely proud of the Caribbean. We never shut up. We never stop talking about where we're from. And we use our spheres of influence fairly effectively. But what we need to be doing more of as CTO and as our individual member countries is to provide information constantly to our diaspora so that they have the tools at the ready, so that they can go into their professional organizations and their churches and their schools and their neighborhoods and spread the gospel according to the Caribbean. Some of our diaspora have, of course, left home quite a long time ago, and some, in fact, weren't even born there, because we're not just talking about first-generation Caribbeans, we're talking about people who are of Caribbean heritage. And so we're extremely interested in reaching out to them and not only inviting them to come back to the Caribbean and take vacations, but to bring their friends and their families with them. And as you probably realize, when I say this, it's really not just only about people of Caribbean heritage constantly going back to the country of their parents' birth. It's about treating the entire Caribbean as their own. So a great deal of attention is being paid to, and tools created, and Johnson John Rose and Silma Brown Bramble and my colleagues will want me to refer you to onecaribbeandiaspora.com, and you'll see how that site is starting to develop as a place where Caribbean people and their friends will go to get whatever they need, things Caribbean. Before I conclude these very brief remarks, I want to excuse me, express on behalf of our chairman of the Council of Ministers of the CTO, the Honorable Ricky Skerritt, members of the board, the governments and people of the Caribbean, our sadness at the passing of one of your colleagues and one of our friends, Colin Rickards. Colin was a friend of the Caribbean, and we will miss him greatly. We rely on you, on all of the media, and Colin certainly was one of the most well-known and proficient purveyors of stories on the Caribbean. We rely on all of you to tell those compelling stories and to present those enchanting images of our destinations, and we never want to take that for granted. So thank you for continuing to do that. I'm also acutely aware of the fact that often when we say these things, we entirely exclude those who do it on radio. And so thank you very much for that as well. There was no intention to exclude the radio broadcasters. But you do still present images and word pictures of the Caribbean. And every time I talk about the radio, you know, I remember some years ago having a job at a radio station 100 years ago. And I was chatting with someone. I was in a little group, not unlike this, about possibilities of expanding my career in broadcasting and all of those grand images that young people have and should have. And so somebody was saying, well, what about TV? And someone in the group said, Hugh, let me give you a piece of advice. You have just the right face and body for radio. Stay off TV. So I never launched a television career. But anyway, those are my brief opening remarks. If there are questions, then I'll be happy to answer those for you. I skimmed over quite a number of the issues, and I'm sure that you have questions that will probe a little deeper.
Hugh, hi, it's Roanne here in the back of the room. We are recording this session, so I'm going to walk around the room with the mic, and although it's a small room, I'm going to offer the mic to anybody who has questions so that we can make sure to capture that. So I think we have a question right here.
Hi, Mr. Riley. Jim Byers again from the Toronto Star. Can you tell us a little bit more about the travel value TVS and when people might start seeing that? I think I have filled out the odd questionnaire when I've departed from the Caribbean, but it sounds like a fascinating program, so anything you can pass along in terms of timing would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's start there. It's a work in progress in the sense that we announced the beginning of the work because we thought it was important to do that, to let people know what we were thinking about and to start getting them excited about it. But there's a great deal of, I keep saying it, it's a great deal of science behind making it right. In essence, we know that the public is now saying how they feel about everything that they do. There is a blog for everything, there is a website for everything, and everybody who has taken a trip anywhere probably goes to some site like TripAdvisor and makes comments. So people are talking about us now. I think it's a very good thing. Let's park that for a second. We also know that we ourselves are doing exit surveys. Some of our member countries are doing them. We do them for some countries. So separate and distinct from what the public is doing, we are also asking those that actually visit our individual countries, how did we do? Well, what we're doing now is to create a more organized way of collecting that information by criterion. So we've started by surveying several thousand visitors to say, tell us what the important items are to you. Things like entry, I know this because I've seen the results now, and in fact there are 26 criteria that came out of the survey. We're going to whittle those down to a smaller number. But people have a specific interest in things like entrance and exit, entry and exit. We want to know how we're doing with customs and immigration, the first impression and the last impression. You know, you spent your whole morning, whole day, really, traveling from Toronto or from Calgary or from Vancouver to the Caribbean. It's the middle of the winter. You're dressed appropriately for your departure point, but you're feeling a little toasty now because you're wearing all those layers and so on. You just arrived in the Caribbean several hours later. How empathetic are we to your situation? How quickly can we get you through? How do we deal with all of that? And then when you're leaving again, how do we handle that? What about our beaches? What about the environment? What about the accommodation sector? What about all of those aspects that are important to a visitor? The things that they look for, the things that they determine whether they're going to come back to this particular country. So we are taking that information based on what they say, and we are then asking them online to rate how we do. We have actually a presentation which I'm sure we can share with you if you have more specific questions, but I'll say again that it is unfolding. I must add this, that there are components that already exist, so we're not going to reinvent the wheel. For instance, there is There is something called Hospitality Assured, which covers a great deal of the hospitality parts of how a destination does. There are programs that rate the environmental aspects, beaches and greenery and so on. Any components that fit the criteria that we're looking at will be conscripted into this so that we don't reinvent the wheel. So for argument's sake, if in getting TVS rating, we discover that a particular destination has fallen short in an area of the environment, and we know that there is a program that that destination can now apply to fix that particular area. Well, Destination X, here is what stands between you and getting TVS rating. Your beaches need work. Your overall environment is lacking. There is a program which helps to fix that. If customer satisfaction is lacking in the area of, let's go back to entrance and exit, there's a training program that will fix that, and so on. So the bottom line is that the public and the destination will know how the destination is doing in terms of getting total visitor satisfaction rating, TVS rating.